output sorting sorting was in theory the same as input recycling. Nowadays, we open the door from the recycler and go into the recycling plant, where you can find usually a lot of activities as well to produce the right input quality of a recycler in front of the extruder, for example, because he has to design the input quality for his output. And we measure now in front of the extruder. So even for PET bottles, between the front door and the extruder, there's a difference of 5, 6, 7%. If you go to flexible film, it can be up to 30% the difference. So it is much more difficult now to achieve the 50%. In the end, we have to collect around 80% put on the market to be able to recycle 50% in the end. This is the current performance in Europe of the overall packaging. I think overall it does not look too bad, but always be a little bit careful. For some countries, and I will not name them, you cannot fully trust the figures because the European Commission is trusting the member states that they send the right data following the rules. But if you see in reality, you sometimes doubt the figures, especially for plastics. If you see here, in theory, all these countries should have reported following the new rules. I'm not 100% sure whether this is the case. There are some countries, if you go in the countries and you don't see infrastructure for the collection, then of course you doubt how this is possible to achieve over 50% of recycling. And the Commission has promised to work on this in the future, but of course it is difficult for them to attack the member states in a too brutal way. So let's see how this will develop. Just an example how the story developed over the years. This is the example of Spain. And you can see that especially for plastics, they started from scratch in the end of the 90s. And now, year by year, a continuous improvement of the performance together with a continuous improvement of the infrastructure. So this is a figure I would really trust. And because if you go to Spain now, you can see the collection infrastructure everywhere. As you will probably know, EPR is a concept. It is not a business plan or something. So I'm unfortunately not able to send you a 200-page document how to do it. On the other side, as it is only a concept, it can be adapted in a very good way to the national circumstances. In Europe, we took it to the extreme, I would say. So every country developed it in its specific and certain way. So everything is possible, and you can find every solution, I would say, in Europe. So you have a lot of countries with one system or one dominating system in the hands of obliged industry. And then you have some countries with competing PROs, up to 40, 45 in Poland. But even within the competing systems, you have different solutions. You have countries like Germany and Austria, where the competing systems are sharing the collection infrastructure and diverse the material only after collection. Whereas in other competing countries, they have divided the countries. So if you go in Bulgaria, you will see that half of Sofia, the capital, is served by one PRO and the other half is served by another PRO, but they're using a different system. Whether this is useful or not, I leave it to you. But if you see the performance of the countries and the infrastructure, it is a lot speaking if they are sharing the infrastructure so that the inhabitants are not bothered by the competing PROs.
Yep.
Okay, you have countries where the municipalities are responsible for the system, for the collection, in some countries even for the and the recycling, and industry is then paying what the local authorities are doing. And then, of course, you have always the fight: are the municipalities doing it in an efficient and effective way, or are they wasting too much money? On the other side, you have countries like Germany, where the municipalities are out. So industry is responsible for organizing the collection, sorting, and recycling. And then, of course, you have some solutions in between. You have countries with a deposit system for beverage containers on top. You have countries without a deposit system. You have countries with a special system for commercial packaging, countries still without any EPR for commercial packaging, or an integrated way. So shared costs, incentive costs, full costs, even more than full costs. So everything is possible. A paradise for consultants, because especially for medium-sized and small companies, it is sometimes difficult to understand how they should comply in the various countries. But the Commission, of course, and the other European institutions, they have understood that this diversity is not healthy. So they are trying to learn from the best practices and trying to streamline their existing systems. Also to be able to better understand who is running a good system and who is running a not so good system. So in the 2018 legislation, so-called EPR minimum requirements has been approved, which you can see here: roles and responsibilities, fee modulation, monitoring, and
meeting online.
Luckily, you can see, and we were quite proud of this, that many of the minimum requirements are reflecting our golden rules that we agreed on 10 years ago. But of course, member states have had a lot of time to implement these minimum requirements. 24, 25 is the deadline when they have to implement it. So let's see whether all member states will follow these minimum requirements. But of course, the politicians have to go on. They are not interested in the past. They are always interested in tomorrow. They are looking often for new projects where they can highlight themselves as the savior of the environment. So a new packaging legislation has been proposed in the end of last year by the Commission, especially complaining that we are using still too much packaging, that we are still using too much one-way packaging, especially that packaging is growing, especially from online sales, and that we have to stop this trend, that we have to stop the trend that industry is still using too much unrecyclable packaging for whatever reason, and this has to be stopped now. And so they are proposing a lot of very drastic new measures. Like, for example, we will have reusable targets for beverage containers, for commercial packaging, with the intention to extend these targets on the long run to all sectors and all packaging. So, for example, for a trace in the commercial sector, there will be a target of 90% in 2040, which is, of course, quite ambitious. Whether it makes sense or not is doubted by industry, but still, it seems to have a lot of support by politicians and the member states. There will be minimum recycled content targets for all packaging, even for food sensitive packaging. There should be minimum recycled content targets in the future, with targets up to 2040. So it's a long horizon, but at the moment we do not know how to fulfill them. Probably we need chemical recycling, because the food agency is not accepting mechanical recycling besides bottle-to-bottle recycling from PET. So a lot of innovation has to be done to be able to fulfill this new kind of targets. Moreover, from 2030, we are not anymore allowed to put unrecyclable packaging on the market. Again, with changing the definition of unrecyclable packaging. Up to now, it was enough to find one professor who is able to recycle one kind of packaging in one lab. In the future, recyclability means that a packaging is really collected, really sorted, and really recycled in the member states. And of course, if you look to the packaging, especially for plastics, we put on the market a lot of small packaging wrappers around sweets, etc. We are even if you collect it, we are not able to sort it at the moment. So we have 6 years to make a big jump in our technology, or we have to change the packaging. So this is something which is really giving a lot of headache at the moment to European industry, whether we will be able to make these big technological jumps, or whether we are able to find different solutions for this kind of packaging. At the same time, the EPR fees will have to be modulated following the new recyclability approach. There is a 5-step judgment whether a packaging is recyclable or not. And so we have to design our fees in the future following these 5 steps for each packaging. So you can imagine this will mean a lot of administrative reporting necessary from industry, which is, of course, giving some headaches to industry at the moment as well. But it keeps us all busy. It keeps us in the job, to take it positive. The Commission has promised a lot of new green jobs for European industry. It seems that the majority of these green jobs will go to consultants, which are needed to fulfill all these new obligations. Fee modulation, because I learned you are interested in fee modulation. At the moment, we have already some countries which are applying a fee modulation, mainly the countries where you have only one system, because for them it is easier to modulate the fees. If you are competing with other PROs, then you have a very simple fee modulation. You have one price for a company for all the packaging he's putting on the market. Up to now, not with a modulation, because this is not working in competition. We have to find a way how to modulate fees in a competitive environment. Probably there will be a special fund for fee modulation where the companies have to pay in, and then the goods packaging will be rewarded by this fund. This is the plan how fee modulation will be done in Germany now. In general, fee modulation is done by costs. So how much does it cost to collect, sort, and recycle a certain packaging? And in this way, the countries that have fee modulation are applying it. So of course, a bottle, to use the easiest example, a clear PET bottle is much easier to collect, to sort, and to recycle. You even get a lot of money usually for the recyclers, compared with a multi-layer film, which is not recyclable. So there is an easy way to differentiate the costs, which is done, for example, in Italy, which you can see here. Also differentiating between commercial packaging and household packaging. So you have differentiation between these two things, and then whether it is recyclable and non-recyclable. And you can see here a packaging, a household packaging, non-recyclable. You pay over 500 euros per ton. If you have a recyclable packaging from household, it's only 200 euros per ton. So you really feel here the difference, and this is of course a quite good incentive for industry to try to move from this level to the other level. The French have a modulation or a differentiation of the fees since many years, and they have especially a way how to punish certain packaging. They have a a special fee for so-called disrupting packaging, and they pay a lot more than good packaging, good packaging. A disrupt an example for disruptive packaging is, for example, a glass bottle with a ceramic cap, because as far as I understand, the ceramics are destroying the whole glass recycling. So if you still put such packaging on the market, you pay 3 or 4 times the money as if you would not use the ceramic cap. And then the French are giving a lot of bonuses for goods to recycle packaging if you have a special sorting label on the packaging, etc., etc. So a very complex modulation system. The Swedes are more or less following the Italian approach, so they are just differentiating between recyclable packaging, meaning what is really recycled in Sweden at the moment, and non-recyclable packaging. So between €3.5 per kilo for recyclable packaging and more than €5 per kilo for non-recyclable packaging, with the intention to increase the non-recyclable rates year by year. Our Belgian friends, Force Plus, they have again a different approach, differentiating not between recyclable and non-recyclable, but differentiating between the specific packaging items. So as you can see here, if you can see it, for example, for plastics, they have a special, quite cheap fee for transparent PET bottles, higher fees for colored PET, a high fee for opaque PET bottles, and the same for other rigid packaging or flexible packaging. Always trying to put the right costs to the specific packaging. Active cost basing, this is called, as they tell me. But of course you need a lot of data, a lot of understanding of your system to be able to differentiate the costs between the various packaging items. This is for us, I would say, the most important demand to politicians, that we are allowed to connect costs in the fee modulation, because we would like to avoid that politicians decide by feelings. Say we don't like, let's take an example, beverage cartons, so you, PRO, have to give a double or triple fee to beverage cartons without really a justification. This, you would say our politicians would not do this, but we have seen it in some member states that the minister wakes up in the morning, has a bad experience for breakfast, and then he gives a call to the PRO and say, you have to give a higher fee to a certain kind of packaging. That really happens. It is really amazing. CO2, climate change. I'm coming to the end of the presentation soon. This is something I think which is getting more and more attention since 1, 2, 3 years. We have some members which are taking care of this more than others, which are trying to understand what is the effect from a CO2 point of view of their activities. So how much CO2 are we emitting with the collection, sorting, and recycling on one side, but on the other side, how much CO2 are we saving because of not using virgin materials? And I'm showing you the countries here which are doing such an exercise, and that they are calculating this. As you can see, again, there's a big variety. Of course, different calculation methods. We had an expert on this who had tried to understand the different calculation methods, and he has even developed a little Excel tool for our members which are not doing this up to now, so that they can calculate on a safe way how much CO2 they are saving with their activities. there will be a workshop, an online workshop in some weeks. So I can send one of you the link and so on if you are in interest to learn more. This is something where I'm still learning as well to understand the complexity of this. This is new for me as well. Since one year, 1.5 years, I'm trying to better understand this. I just understand that we are already doing a lot good things for the environment by recycling, but of course, I think we can improve here a lot as well. And if we improve the activities especially from the collection, if we improve the routes, if we improve the vehicles, we can even save much, much more CO2 in the future. And I think this is something where I hope that the EPR systems will learn much more in the future as well, and listen to the other countries, because there's a lot going on everywhere where the people are improving their systems, and I think where we can learn a lot from what has been done. So to extend quickly the collection to all plastic packaging, which has been done by Belgium and Luxembourg within a quite short time frame. They concentrated up to now, until 3 years ago, only on the so-called valuable packaging, but now they are collecting all of it, and they have found sorting and recycling options for all the non-bottle rigids and flexibles which they are collecting now, with a big focus also on the sorting, because you can do the sorting in a much better way. But you have, of course, to invest some money in it, so that I think in Belgium, they are sorting now 15 different fractions. Huh? And as better the fraction is, as purer, as better you can recycle it later on now. Our Belgian friends that are concentrating on commercial packaging, they are working now much more with the commercial sector, so that also smaller companies are separating at source the commercial packaging which is arising in their plants. And our Dutch members, I think they are the #1 in the design for environment, design for recycling efforts. Their industry has founded a special institute that is helping Dutch companies to improve their packaging. I think 13 people, 13 experts are working now in the Netherlands to help industry to better design their packaging. And what is possible with a good legislation, a good EPR system, and the necessary funding is the Belgium example. As I said, they extended the collection, but if you extend the collection, you have to find a solution with the additional plastics you are collecting. So within 21, they called for tender for 5 new sorting plants. They found waste management companies who said, yes, we are ready to do the investment if we have a long-term contract. I think they have a contract for 9 years, as far as I know, who sort these 15 fractions now. And then, of course, if you sort more, you need more recycling plants. And so they called for tender for 5 recycling plants, not only bottle to bottle, but also to recycle film and to recycle other plastics, which are now up and running in Belgium as well. So they were able to free an investment of 1 billion within, as you can see, 2 or 3 years. Of course, the EPR fees do not have to cover in 1 year the 1 billion. This will be spread over many years now with regard to the contracts and the output these new facilities will deliver. But still, the collection is the biggest challenge, especially out of home. Although it makes only 10%, as it seems, of the packaging put on the market, it is in the focus of politicians more and more. And even out of home, you have to differentiate. You have the closed environment in offices. and so on, where the sorting behavior should be the same as in your home. So you can use more or less the same equipment. Then you have the so-called semi-closed environment on festivals and so on, where you have to have special targeted initiatives to convince the people to sort their packaging. But of course, the on-the-go, the open challenges on the streets, at train stations, airports, and so on. This is a very big challenge to convince the people to do the extra effort. Even if they sort the packaging at home in the right way, on the go, the people are extremely lazy. So in Belgium, they are trying now to find the right measure for the right environment to collect even the last percentages of packaging. As I said here, this is the example from the Netherlands with this Netherlands Institute for Sustainable Packaging. If you are in Europe, I can only advise you to visit them. It's really amazing what they are doing and what you can do to help industry to find to improve the packaging. And of course, what is done in the Netherlands, all the other countries in Europe are benefiting from this, because if Procter is changing their packaging, they do not only change it for the Netherlands, they change it minimum for Europe. A lot of work is done with our inhabitants so that they do the right thing. We have to explain them in detail what should be put in the separate collection and what should be not put in the separate collection via local activities, via federal campaigns, TV spots. You can see things on the street to motivate you to do the right thing. But in the end, the most hopeful target groups are our kids. I'm too old to change my behavior. They are really enthusiastic to do the effort. They are telling the kids, they are telling the parents and grandparents at home if you do something wrong in sorting. So many of my members work a lot with the kids to get them as sorting ambassadors. This is really great, and they have fun. But also we are doing a lot of efforts to clean up the mess somehow, because there is still a lot of packaging littered in the countryside. So we are all supporting cleanup initiatives together with many NGOs to clean up the mess. Hopefully this is less and less important on the long run, but still a lot of packaging is ending up at the wrong place. You can find all these initiatives on our homepage if you're interested, of course. And of course, as I said in the beginning, a lot of work is done now by industry, not only by the obliged companies, by the whole value chain, because all have understood if we do not improve the packaging and the system, we will have a problem to continue our business. So you can see in all the materials, in all the initiatives, a lot is done now, and hopefully in the next years, we will all be able to solve our problems. Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope it was what you expected. Thank you.
Thanks, Joachim. Exceptionally informative. I'm wondering now if we could please go to any questions that anyone may have.
Malcolm here. Thank you, Joachim. I just had a question in terms of our government is also similarly very focused on the litter space. So to your point, the 10%, do you have an estimate in terms of percentages of the other two, in terms of the open at home and then the events, in terms of what percentages those are as well?
Oh, I would have to ask for splits because they have detailed figures on all these things. So please remind me and I will ask them.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
Joachim, I do have a question as we're waiting for other ones to come in. We've recorded the session. I was just wanting to check with you personally whether you're okay for us to have that as a recording, or is that okay with you?
Yes, of course, and
Awesome.
I can also send you the presentation, of course, that you can distribute if you like. Huh?
Yeah, thank you very much. And you touched on the fact that there may be a workshop or additional information on the CO2 component, something which is also of significant interest to us here in New Zealand. So if you are able to send any following information, we would be very, very grateful of that.
Yes, of course. Our pleasure.
Joachim, it's I think we discussed when I was over. Our government here in New Zealand has we are only looking at an EPR scheme for plastic and not for the other materials. Are you aware of any of your EPR schemes that just focus on one single material outside of the container return systems that operate?
No, all are dealing with all kinds of packaging. But for example, there are some approaches like in Italy where you have a common system for the income and the governance side, and then you have material consortia. So for example, in Italy, there's a special consortium just taking care of the plastics. Okay. So I think that might be interesting for you to speak to them if you have questions and so on. But for all my members, plastic is the main challenge. So the main headache and the main work is on plastics. The other materials are not so in the focus. Paper is getting a problem, because the paper industry is very happy that industry is replacing some plastic packaging by 100% paper, and then you see the asterisks with a little part of plastics as well. So this is becoming, I think, the next problem, but at the moment this is not so much in the focus of the politicians. So most time of my members is spent for plastics.
Because within the way the legislation has been, or the gazetted criteria have been set, those plastic lined fiber items would be covered within our stewardship.
Okay.
Because there's no tolerance level for saying it's 90% fiber, therefore 10% plastic. Okay. Doesn't matter. The other area that we've got, which I think when you show the various EPR schemes that are operating, a lot of them separate out commercial stroke pre-consumer from the household consumer packaging. And again, our focus appears to look at all of it. Do you, again, within your membership, are you seeing mostly that the focus is household and consumer, and there are separate ways of addressing commercial and industrial?
Yes. For most of the commercial packaging part, the systems, you do not need to intervene the market, because this is usually the collection and the treatment is usually taking place in Europe. So the job of the PRO is mainly to monitor and to collect the data. So that's I would say is the major job in the commercial area. Nowadays, especially my Belgian member is interfering a bit more to try to find better recycling solutions than up to now. But for most of them, they are more monitoring, collecting the data to show how much is recycled of this. Whereas for household packaging, you need to intervene to work more with the markets.
So Joachim, just you made a comment around the previous data was very focused around your percentage recovery based on collection, so the input side of that, and now it's moved to the extruder, so really the output side of that. Is that reflected across not just plastic but all materials?
It is for all materials. Yeah.
The reason I asked is in New Zealand, there was a focus on our current CRS document where they focused on collection for the plastics materials, and then they flipped that to using the processing as a reason for glass being lower than it was reported. So really important clarification. So everybody's moving to that output focus.
Yeah. That's for all. So for glass, for example, up to now, we have special companies everywhere that are preparing the cullets, and up to now there were the recyclers, and now it is the glass mill who is the recycler. So yeah, so this is counting for all the materials, and so all materials are losing some percentages of performance.
Joachim, Tony Noel here. A question in relation to eco-modulation. Are you finding that eco-modulation is being used by brand owners, by producers, as a real opportunity, or is it being seen more from a penalty perspective? They pay the price and move on, or are they seriously looking at how to change their packaging to make the greatest advantage from eco-modulation?
I have the feeling that many take it as additional motivation to speed up with the change, and to have it as a good weapon in the discussion with the marketeers as well, because they are very often in between of an environmental improvement of packaging.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, team, just checking in for Joachim if there's any other questions you may have.
I've got a final one actually.
Okay.
Joachim, I'm putting you on the spot here. We are, our data collation systems at the moment are fairly rudimentary, and in the design of a scheme, we will need to put in place a very good and a very efficient way of collecting data, both from the consumption side and then the recovery and processing side of the schemes that within EXPRA. Where would you say go to talk to for the best data capture systems?
I think the Netherlands and Belgium are my favorites for this, especially the Dutch are very structured people, extremely structured people.
Thank you.
And I see that there's a very good question from Craig Dowling that's come in. Perhaps we could just pay attention to that one. What is the approach towards cross-border issues, such as when recycling infrastructure and/or collection is more advanced and sophisticated in one jurisdiction than another, but the plastics themselves cross borders very freely? So, Joachim, in your view, how might systems respond in an equitable and efficient way to that reality?
We are all demanding in the European Union that the collected and sorted waste should move as freely as our inhabitants are allowed to move. We call it a Schengen of waste, because we have in some countries we have a overcapacity of sorting plants. In some countries we have good recyclers, especially specialized recyclers, which need material from several countries. So that is a demand of industry to try to reduce the administrative burden for moving our material from one country to another. And it does not make sense that every country has the full variety of recycling plants. Huh? So there's a growing understanding that if you really want a circular economy in the European Union, you have to give the freedom to this industry as well. Huh?
The challenge we have there is how geographically remote we are, Joachim, other than Australia.
Yes. I was wondering, the closest other country is Australia, and it is still already far away. Huh? So I would be afraid that you will have developed to find solutions for most of the packaging of your own. Huh?
Which would, I guess, be similar to the Belgian model, as ideally trying to find all of the systems in country.
Yeah, this was a lot based on political pressure. Huh? The politicians in Belgium are trying to position Belgium as the recycling hub in Europe. Huh? So they were answering a political demand. Huh? It would have made sense to cooperate more with the neighboring countries, but sometimes you have to deliver what your politicians want from you to stay in power.
Excellent. No, thank you so much for that. Just checking now, Raven, are you able to please just let us know if there's any other questions in the chat that haven't been covered off, please?
No, thanks to Tony, you have picked up Craig's question, and there aren't any others other than about the notes, which we've clarified that we will be sending them out. So we're all good on that front.
Excellent.
Okay. Good.
Oh, thank you, Joachim. I mean, on behalf of, I suppose, the sustainable globe of everything you're doing to play a vital role and a very purposeful one in that to bring people together through Europe. But we also appreciate you reaching further afield through linking in with Lynn and others to make this possible. We will be sending your deck out to those that are on this call and others that could not make the call, but we'll also make sure we continue to be in contact with you as things progress.
I took it as a start of a longer relation. Huh? So hope to see you soon again, and perhaps one day even in face to face, because it is always my dream to go one day to New Zealand. So I still have some years, so let's work on it. Huh?
Well,
okay.
You say that, and then we think of the fact that you're in Brussels, so I'm very envious of that too.
Yeah.
Have a good remaining meeting, and come safe home after all these troubles in the morning.
Thank you very much.
Huh?
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Excellent. Okay, so should we go back to the apologies, unless we wanted to have any brief conversation now that Joachim's dropped off the line? Any topics of conversation you think we need to round out on what you just saw?
Cam, if I could make a comment. I think what you've had from Joachim, and we've seen quite a lot of the work from EXPRA already in this particular journey, is incredibly valuable work for us, and particularly when we're looking at global best practice models. And yes, we understand that Europe is not New Zealand and Australia, where we're much greater distance apart. But there's an awful lot here that we can learn, and I would just encourage all of your members to pay as much attention as they possibly can to what is happening elsewhere in their world. Some of your members will have a European home base, some will have an American home base, etc., etc. But just taking those learnings, I think, is going to help us enormously in finding ultimately the most sensible solution for New Zealand.
It's Tony, it's a very important point, especially on that one of those opening slides. It gave transparency of which global companies are actually very much part of this on that committee, and it stated companies like Coca-Cola, Unilever, Mars, to name a few. And I do feel through our contacts through those companies in New Zealand, they could really reach out and get some richness of information through their global contacts. So it's I think it's yeah.
And just to finish on that, I guess what I would be encouraging all FGC member companies to do, and I'm sure most of you are doing it anyway, but just to look very intensively at what you can do with your packaging, because this eco-modulation reality is something that's going to hit you at some stage in the future. We don't know exactly when, but some companies are going to get penalized by that. Other companies, I'm sure, will see that as a real opportunity to change their packaging to actually, benefit their company, but also benefit the environment. I think now's the time to be starting to think about that and look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that, Tony. And hey, Margaret, I noticed you've got your hand up. A question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I couldn't help thinking as we went through that this will be coming our way in some shape or another at some time or other in the future. And so as we're planning not only our own packaging, but as we think about systems, how do we think about systems that might have to grow and extend in the future? If I was to use the analogy of a house, don't build a house and put, I don't know, the kitchen where you might have to extend in 5 years' time. So how do we just build with that future in mind rather than just creating the solution and going, here's the solution, job done? One of the things I think that we're seeing in New Zealand and also here in Australia is governments are not particularly supportive in encouraging the system changes that need to be done. Instead, it's push to packaging and let the waste system do whatever the waste system does. But we need to start thinking ahead to a more connected system and be ready for that. Sorry, that's all.
No, thanks, Margaret. I think that's the ongoing challenge, because if you look at the contents of that presentation, one thing that was abundantly clear is that there was a slide right at the end that had a whole lot of TBCs. So a whole lot of TBCs on what different policies going to be throughout Europe, and it's hard because we can create those in advance and do somewhat of a comprehensive pre-mortem across all those components. But yeah, it's a balancing act between not jumping in shadows, but making sure we're set for the future. So it's a very interesting topic you raise, and one that we need to be mindful of through the journey. Okay, team. Well, if there's nothing else on there, just a reminder.
Can I just ask one more question? Like what we just heard was something that is so advanced compared with what we've got here. Interesting as it was, what do we take out of it for as we design a scheme now? What's the takeout? What's the learning for what we have to apply?
Who would like to take that? I'm happy to.
I can take that from a plastics perspective, in terms of actually everything Joachim raised as challenges are remarkably similar to the challenges that we have here in New Zealand in terms of politicians looking at the 10% of the problem because it's litter, and and then also dealing with making sure that we're actually getting members on board and not just shifting sand, like you said, in terms of plastic, is currently the big focus, but paper is the next big problem. So without going into the scheme design piece and getting ahead of ourselves, I think absolutely we can take those global learnings, apply them for, hey, we are on an island, but it seems absolutely consistent in terms of the problems that they are facing and overcoming. They're absolutely the same things that we're looking at here. So it's just remarkably consistent. So to Tony's point, I think we absolutely need to embrace and take those lessons from them and not have to go through those hard lessons ourselves, because there's a lot of good knowledge there. It's just working out what's the best for our island, I think.
Yeah, and look, I look at the detail and everything he covered off. It was very comprehensive, and he's obviously exceptionally experienced and knowledgeable. And for him to be able to then point us in the direction of Belgium and Netherlands, just that in itself, without us reading thousands of pages of documentation across every scheme, is very helpful. But I can only but assume that the likes of Rob and Tony will have additional thoughts in this space.
Yeah, look, just as a couple of high level comments that I'd make, and there, what I took out